Ouch.
If you can do precision freehand work, it's not too difficult to compensate your own guitar nut. This isn't as difficult as it may sound if you are patient. Don't grind too much off at once and check your dimensions frequently. What you will need is nut stock, which would be a nut blank or a piece of bone from beef. You just need a small amount of material to make these. The pieces are very small. You need a bench grinder, a vernier caliper or a micrometer or some sort of precision measuring device. You'll need a ruler with a millimeter scale, a small piece of thin aluminum or rigid plastic, either nut slot files or a selection of thin saw blades, some kind of locking forceps or hemostat or small vice grip, something of that type. And you need a tuner with a digital cent scale. Now if you don't have this, you can download a freeware one from aptuner.com, which is a very nice tuner. The only problem with it is it's so accurate that you're never going to see a zero on that digital readout. A guitar isn't that stable, and if you can get a string in tune to the point where it reads zero before the decimal point, you're doing good with it. This tuner also has a graphing mode that shows you the actual tone of the string over time, which is not that stable on a guitar. As you can see the lines on this graph, you can see that the tone drifts, and all these other lines on here are all the harmonics that come off of a guitar string. Now the first thing we're going to have to do is make a gauge. Use your thin piece of plastic or metal material to make this. And you want to make the gauge maybe 2 inches higher, so just something to get a hold of. The important thing is the foot of this gauge, which needs to be on the thick end slightly thicker than the height of your bass E string from the fingerboard at the nut. And the thin end needs to be slightly thinner than the height of the treble E string from the fingerboard at the nut. We're going to use this gauge for 2 things. To establish the height of the string over the fingerboard at the nut, and to determine the amount of compensation the string needs. To measure the height, simply slip the wedge under the string at the nut until it makes contact. Mark the point where it makes contact, remove the wedge, and then measure the thickness of the wedge at the point where the string touches it. This will be your string height. Next, we will determine the amount of compensation the string needs. In order to do this, you need to take your bass E string and test the tuning on every fret except for the open string, all the way up and down the neck. Now you're going to find that there's no place where you can tune it where all of these are going to be exactly in tune. What you want to do is get it so all the frets are as close to possible as agreeing that they're all in tune. Now you'll find after you do this that your open string is fairly far out of tune. Now what you want to do is take your gauge again and insert it under the string tight enough so that the string sounds clearly when you pluck the string. Now you want to pluck the string and move this gauge back and forth from the nut until you find a point where the string is really in tune. Now this is your compensation point. This is how much compensation the string is going to need. You want to measure this distance and record that on your notebook. The next thing you want to do is make your block, which means to take a small piece of the nut stock material and make a block that is as high as your recorded string height and as wide as your compensation point, and long enough so that it'll fit the space between the strings without interfering with the next block. You want to make that block by cutting a piece of material big enough and just grinding it on your bench grinder until you have a block that meets all those dimensions. Next, you want to slide that block under the string and glue it in with wood glue, white or yellow glue, and give it time to dry. Then the next step is to adjust the slot, which means to use a nut slot file, or if you don't have nut slot files, then they're probably going to cost as much as it would cost to have a professional do this for you. So what I did was I got an X-Acto hobby saw, which cuts a slot just about right for the treble E string. And I got an assortment of hacksaw blades and what are called mini hacksaw blades. You can get these at a place like Harbor Freight. They're not very expensive. And by using singles blades or stacking the blades in various combinations and just bundling them together with masking tape, you can make a saw blade that is the right width for each slot on the nut of your guitar. If you can't get the exact width of the slot, you can make the stack of blades a little bit wider and grind off some of the offset in the teeth until it's the right width. Now these slots have to be wide enough so the string can slip freely in it, but not so wide that it's sloppy and moves around in it. You want to cut these slots down so that the edge of the compensation block is the high point, and the string has to slope down toward the headstock of the guitar at an angle. Otherwise the string will buzz in the slot. This has to be the high point where the edge of the block is. Now you simply repeat this process for each string, and you'll probably find that the treble E string and maybe some of the other thinner strings don't need any compensation at all. And that's how you do it. If this tutorial helped you, why not check out my digital montages and music compositions at my virtual gallery at michaelstick.weebly.com, or watch more of my videos on YouTube and tell your friends about them.